Good day. I am so happy to be here. I am Dr. Shelley Frazier Trotman Scott, and today I have with me the illustrious Dr. Donna Ford. She is a distinguished professor at the Ohio State University, which is where I had the privilege of meeting her, and she served as one of my chairs for my doctoral program. And so it was there that I was introduced to gifted education in the capacity that I am working now. I was a gifted student, but after seeing Dr. Ford actually on my orientation, the day of orientation, um, she spoke and she started speaking and I lifted my eyes up and then I had to put my eyes back down because she's a woman of small stature, but she had the big voice and she provided so much information about things that were reflective of me. And I knew that I needed to work with her. So I am so excited that we are able to hear from her today. And you have a chance to hear some of the things that she has experienced in her work. So thank you, Dr. Ford, for agreeing to meet with me today. I appreciate that.
Well, Dr. Frazier Trotman Scott, let me tell you, that was a beautiful, personal, wonderful introduction. I was not expecting that, so I'm just smiling all over the place. I am delighted. That was beautiful. Thank you for taking me back down memory lane. Yeah.
Yeah, yes, yes. Yes, she's a small woman, but she has a powerful punch, and you all will see that in a minute. So, the first question I want to ask you, Dr. Ford, is how do you think your work has influenced the field, and why do you think this was your contribution?
Oh, I love that question. I stand on the shoulders of some other Black female scholars in particular, and but what I always thought was that we and they were older. We had different personalities, and as you said, I wanted to bring my voice to the field and talk about Black students being underrepresented in my own way. And
Mhm.
so focusing on underrepresentation a lot because I have over 300 and something publications. And you know that because we've co-authored quite a bit together. I enjoy working with you. But, so I wanted to bring my own personality and way of talking about underrepresentation and injustices to the field of gifted and talented education. And then also I had some other ideas, some things that I felt hadn't been said or hadn't been said enough. And that would be talking more about not just underrepresentation, but why, unfortunately, too many Black students underachieve, why they may find the curriculum irrelevant, so,
Mhm.
I'm sure, you'll bring up the matrix, which you helped me to modify and strengthen. But, the curriculum, talking about social and emotional needs through a psychological perspective, through a racial identity, cultural perspective, and then really, really, really talking about equity and not just giving lip service to equity, but quantifying equity. So I know that was a long response, but we're both so passionate about equity, diversity, and inclusion that I just had to go ahead and say all of that.
No, it wasn't too long. It was necessary. And so, as long as you want to talk, go ahead and talk. I don't think that there will be an issue. So, thank you for that. And especially with it was an issue when I met you 20 plus years ago, and it's an issue still today. And so, as long as it's an issue, it is something that I know that as long as you can, you will be talking about and writing about it. So, what directions and or challenges do you believe are most important for the field of gifted and talented education?
Well, this is going to sound repetitive and redundant in some ways, but since I've been in the field since 1991 when I did my dissertation and earned my PhD, and I've been saying it feels like I've been saying the same damn thing over and over and over again. At least for Black students, underrepresentation has not improved. Back then, it was around 50 something percent, and it's still that percentage now. So we've not made a dent in any way. As much as NAGC has given us opportunities to do presentations, even, even publications, not much has changed. So that remains. It was when I got my dissertation, it was when you got your dissertation. It was and is still, I think, one of the number one issues in the field. Related to that is we've got to find a better way of having anti-racist, culturally responsive assessment, not just test, not just testing, but assessment, and because that is a problem. However, as we have written about, as I have written about over and over and over again, and I'm not the only one, but I and others, when as much as we talk about having equitable, anti-racist, culturally responsive policies and procedures and measures, we've got to get these attitudes right. We got to get rid of this deficit thinking and anti-Blackness that exists the world over. It's a pandemic, racism, but the world over, and in particular anti-Blackness, so that it can stop blinding us to seeing the gifts and talents in Black children. So the attitudes are first.
Yeah, yeah. I agree with that wholeheartedly. Attitude is everything. And if you have a negative attitude about yourself, then it's hard to even see you moving up and being elevated because you don't think you belong. And so sometimes just having people, let's talk about even the people who teach the students. And I think where I'm going with that is, and I'm asking that as well, is because when you see people in positions, then you know that I belong and I can get there. And I sort of touched on that when I did the introduction. When I looked up and saw you were one of 3 Black faculty at the Ohio State University in my program. You, Dr. Gwendolyn Cartledge, and Dr. Ralph Gardner. And so Dr. Cartledge was the one, Gwendolyn Cartledge was the one who told me you should apply for this program. This is what we should do. I think you should apply. I think you would do extremely well. Dr. Gardner, I had him in my undergraduate program in special education. He also said, yes, I think you can do this. And even when I was having some difficulty in my program, the 3 of you got with us, the Black students, to talk to us and remind us that we belonged there, despite what others said. And I know that you remember that situation. We actually met at your home. You opened your home up to us so that because we were devastated, the Black students, but you all helped us. But what do you have to say, or what would you say about not just gifted and talented education as the children, because we're talking about the National Association for Gifted Children, but what about gifted and talented education as it pertains to the teachers?
Excellent. And again, you're taking me down memory lane. I don't exactly remember the year, but you could just put 2024 on it. And unfortunately, the same kinds of situations happen. So I am going to answer your question, but I want to say this. What you said, you could just take what you said with your university experience and remove that and replace it with, this is how our Black and brown children feel in our gifted and talented classes. A lot of people are talking about belonging or belongingness, and that's real. So this is why I believe I was the first, but if not, I was certainly one of the first to talk about we don't just need to recruit Black and brown students into the field. We need to retain them. So the retention piece is another aspect that I have addressed over and over and over again. Now, going to your question, recruitment and retention are unlikely to happen unless we deal with this deficit thinking, okay, that educators too often have. And I'm not just talking about teachers, I mean administrators, because they help inform policies and procedures. I'm talking about guidance and school counselors, all right, because this what they give us this advice. And if they tell you you're not capable, all right, then you believe you're not capable because you're so impressionable as a child, okay? But even look how, with your story, you were impressionable as an adult, but you're even more vulnerable as a child. So at least three things need to happen. One is we need to, educators, this predominantly white teaching force needs to look in the mirror and be honest with yourself about how you feel about Black and Hispanic students, whether they live in poverty or not, okay? Whether they live in poverty or not. How do you feel about working with us? Is deficit thinking, again, I used this word earlier, blinding you from seeing our gifts and talents. And for me, deficit thinking is the less you know about Black people, the more you make up. And this is one reason we have overrepresentation in special education, but that's not our focus. All right. So one is you've got to look in the mirror and be honest with yourself so that change can take place. The second is institutions of higher education. We must make sure that we're preparing teachers to be anti-racist and equity-minded, compassionate, and culturally responsive. Okay, so that means having the right dispositions, your attitudes, your mindsets. Then you need that knowledge through a cultural lens. And then you need, the skills. So higher ed. Now, everything I just said about what needs to be done with higher ed also needs to take place with professional development. We got to stop having professional development that is full of fluff. It has to be real, it has to be authentic, and talk about the challenges that our students face. Otherwise, you're wasting the teacher's time, which ultimately means you're wasting minoritized children and families and communities' time. So that preparation is essential. And this is why I'm so glad that NAGC has hosted these equity symposiums, all right, so that we can have these real discussions. And they can be challenging, they can be difficult, but I believe in the pedagogy of discomfort. No pain, no damn gain. No pain, no gain. So just like you're uncomfortable maybe talking about racism, how the hell do you think children feel experiencing it? I just read skimmed a report this morning from the CDC, Center for Disease Control, talking about, again, the negative impact of racism on our children. And it's undeniable. With the magnitude of underrepresentation for Black and Hispanic students, there is not just implicit bias, like unintentional racism. There's intentional racism. And so when you ask, one of your first questions is, what do I bring to the field? I don't have damn time to play because, lives are at stake. So I'm just my real self. I'm Dr. Ford, but I'm also Donna from Cleveland.
Right.
That's when you really hear how pissed off I am.
Right. And so even I have to remember that the pedagogy of discomfort. I like that. I think I've never heard that, and I like that, the pedagogy of discomfort. So even as we're talking about the students, the vulnerable populations that you write about so often and you talk about so often, let's talk about what they are taught in their classroom settings, because you talked about recruitment and you talked about retention. And one of the ways that you retain people is by making things interesting for them. And so, yes, now we get to talk about the Bloom-Banks matrix that Dr. Ford created in 1999. And then She did additional work to it. She turned it in from a 26 cell matrix. Well, it's still 26 cells, but then she really focused on quadrants, 4 quadrants, and in 2011, and then in 2014, I color coded those quadrants. And then we got something coming up here soon in a book where we're going to do something else for you that can be helpful. But can you talk about your Bloom-Banks matrix and how you think it will and how it could actually help with the retention of students in general in gifted education? Because the one thing about the Bloom-Banks matrix, everybody, is that it is created for everyone. All education should be rigorous and relevant for everyone. So go ahead, Dr. Ford. Nope, you
Absolutely.
asked for that 2 cents, but I had to put it in.
Well, no, absolutely. And I can't thank you enough because your creative mind, you really are. Your creative mind, really, creative thinking and visionary mind, really, when you color coded that, you took this matrix to another level. So let me go ahead and describe it. So I was always, reading in the field, and you still see it today. This is not a criticism. This is fine. That we focused a lot on Bloom's taxonomy, making sure that our gifted and talented students are at the highest, 3 levels of Bloom's taxonomy. And, that's rigor, of course. Now, however, I think Bloom's taxonomy is for every child. I don't know, 16,000 school districts or whatever in the U.S., every child needs Bloom's taxonomy at the highest level, which is rigor. Otherwise, what they're getting is rigor mortis. All right. And so that is disengagement to the nth degree. Okay.
Right.
So, I mean, when I would ask teachers, well, tell me what you're doing with gifted students that you aren't doing with other students. Oh, well, we focus on Bloom's taxonomy. And that always upsets me. I'm like, we focus on critical thinking and problem solving. So with other students, do you focus on uncritical thinking and unproblem solving? Stop. That's for everybody. But so I had to just go on and get that out. But yes, everybody needs to be at those highest 3 levels with creativity, especially, how your mind works. That's at the highest level. All right. As, to state the obvious. Now I'm like, but that's not enough. I want to take that model and then how do we add culture to it so there's not culture blind. I like this word. I mean, I made up this word, I believe, culture blind. People say color blind. I'm saying culture blind. Okay, so here we go. And now we're going to add some culture to it. And so that's when I took James Banks, and it's still, to my knowledge, the only model that is out there that shows you how to infuse multicultural content into the curriculum with the 4 levels. So just like Banks has the 3 lowest levels, right? And then the 3 highest. This has 2 low and 2 high. So we end up with, 6 by 4, 24 cells, and that is 4 quadrants, as you said earlier. So in quadrant 1, which you coded red, very dangerous, all right? It is low level critical thinking, so low level Bloom, and low level Banks, which is contributions and additive. And I'm happy to describe, Banks. All right, but contributions and additive. So it's no critical thinking, and it is about food, fun, fashion, folklore. Is planet safe? Is polemic? Is one perspective, etc. All right, so food, fun, fashion, folklore is contributions, and then additive is the safe, temporary, polemic. Okay, no one needs to be there ever. Then we talk, you color coded it yellow, which is caution. So here it will be low on Bloom's taxonomy, but high on Banks. All right. You know what? I got that wrong.
Yeah,
It would
switch.
be, yeah, it would be, it would be high on Banks, but low on Bloom's.
Right.
And I, still have a
No,
problem,
yeah.
you know,
Yellow. You keep your because you're ready to get to it.
Yeah,
Yellow is high on Banks.
thanks.
I mean, high on Bloom, low on Banks.
Let's start over. So it's high on Bloom,
Yep.
low on Banks,
Yep.
yellow. And
Mm-hmm.
you and I have called that one like the gifted quadrant because there's
Mm-hmm.
critical thinking, but it's about food, fun, fashion, folklore. It's about, nothing. All right.
Mm-hmm.
And then you color coded it blue, which is cool, not cool like real good, but you're getting there, cool, warm. And so then that one would be, now that one would be just the opposite. It would be low on critical thinking, all right,
Mm-hmm.
but high on Banks. And I see that a lot or too often when I go to minoritized conferences. So I have that discussion with them as well. So, the blue and the yellow, that still doesn't benefit anyone. We've got to get all of our students to rigor and relevance, as you said. So it is high on both. So it is high in terms of, for Banks, it would be at the transformation where the curriculum is transformed, and it will be at social action / social justice. And this is where students are not just thinking as we do with transformation, they are acting upon it or making recommendations. All right. So 24 cells, 4 quadrants, and it's a win-win when you're in the green quadrant.
Mm-hmm.
Quadrant.
Right, right, which is the highest on both levels, which is the highest on both levels. So your passion is so apparent. When you speak from the heart, and you speak from experience, I know. So my question to you is, how did you even get into gifted education?
This is a person I got into gift education because of personal reasons, having been identified as gifted, and then I had a high school experience at a private all girls school that really tore me to shreds. It
Mm,
um, got me to hating myself, being ashamed of being Black, being uncomfortable with being smart, being angry that my family was low income. I didn't enter the 10th grade in this private school like that, but I certainly left it. And my mother had to withdraw me after 1 year. So that's not a gifted program, so to speak, but it was, you go to a private school, you're on scholarship, it's certainly for advanced learners. So I never wanted anyone to experience that. So that's one very important reason that I got into the field. And then it was still personal because of my son's experience. I worked with him really hard to make sure that he would be advanced, and I tried to get him in the early kindergarten, and he didn't do well on the test. So I
mm,
still, then test bias exists, and test bias still exists. So he didn't do well on this test, and the psychiatrist, she kind of like talked me out of putting him into school early, and I paid for it because he started being an underachiever in the second grade. Talk about dropping out of school, a second grader. I'd worked
mm,
so damn hard to get him to love school, to love learning, to love reading, to be so very inquisitive, and that was undone, in a matter of a couple of grades. So that's why I focused my dissertation on gifted Black students who underachieve, and that was my first book. So those two personal stories in particular, and of course there are others, but I mean from a personal perspective, whenever I had like maybe I'm gonna go into say special education and get out of gifted and talented education, I will remember both of our experiences, and I was like, oh hell no, I'm staying here. I'm
that's
staying in this field. So that's what got me here. That's what keeps me here. And I just have to say it again, over and over and over again. You can take my experience, 1976, and
mm-hmm.
wipe it, scratch it out, and put 2024, and it's still happening. And this is why, as you said, and as you do, we are not going to stop. fighting for equity, diversity, and inclusion. We are not going to, and our voices are going to be heard in as many outlets as we possibly can.
Yeah, yeah. So, what advice would you give young professionals thinking about entering into gifted education?
Well, I really hope that we are priming the pipeline to get more Black and Hispanic, other minoritized people into the field. And that includes people who live in poverty because we have underrepresentation in that area as well. So there's still a lot of work to be done. And just look at, as I said, I did for myself, just look at what has been said, how it has been said, and bring your own perspectives and experiences, lived experiences to your work, and you will stay passionate. A lot of people, and rightfully so, are concerned about Black students, especially Black males, being overrepresented in high incidence areas of special education. And I want that as well. Stay interested, but don't forget, we also need to open those gifts and talents, nurture the gifts and talents that exist in our population. More of us need to be in STEM fields, etc. We are very creative, as I said earlier. We're very innovative. We think outside the box. A. Boykin calls it expressive individualism. And so we need to, look at, again, our characteristics, and you will see how gifted and talented that's cognitively, that's academically, that's creatively, yes, that's in visual and performing arts, and yes, that's in leadership, that we are. So we got to take everything that we know about gifted and talented education, characteristics, testing, curriculum, working with families, whatever it is, and we got to add that cultural lens. So going back to the matrix, I say we got to bloom it and we got to bank it. All right. So take what we know from these Eurocentric perspectives, and we got to add some culture to it. And then you see that Shelley is gifted and Black. Donna is gifted and Black, not or not Black, but it is and. All right. And we need to merge this. And we will go so much further in life. And you're not just doing this for us as a favor. This truly does help us as, say, a district and as a nation. And that is not hyperbole. We've got to have children reach their potential. One of my favorite quotes, and I grew up with this, and this kept me motivated, was United Negro College Fund. And it said, a mind is a terrible thing to waste. And I kept thinking, I got to work hard, I got to work hard, I got to work hard. And I did, and I do. But I add, a mind is a terrible thing to erase. And when we have underrepresentation, and when we have underachievement, when we have disengagement, then when we have don't have a sense of belonging or belongingness, when you recruit us but you don't retain us, then there's atrophy. Everything that we could be and have been, it becomes undone in far too many ways in my professional and personal experiences.
And that just sort of brings me back to your the term that we think you have coined, which is cultural blindness. When you even talked about, it's not just about race, but it's also just about social economic status or what have you. So if you are a person living in poverty, does not mean that you're not gifted as well. And so region, those types of things, rural versus urban and suburban. So, and we have to think about that when we talk about multicultural, it's not just about race and ethnicity. There's cultures, and poverty is a culture. So I'm glad that you made mention of that. So is there anything else that you would like to add that I didn't ask you?
Well, I do want to say that based on your last comment, I like this phrase, you know, our zip code is not our destiny. And that's exactly what you were just saying. Because
Mhm.
unfortunately, even when we have children who are high income, Black and Hispanic, there's a tendency to still not see our gifts and talents, which goes back to the importance of two things. One, the professional development, and two, I mean, three things: professional development, higher education. But I meant to say this earlier: representation matters, as you said. So we also, and I did a study on this years ago, but we also need to find out why we don't have enough Black teachers overall, but also those coming into the field of gifted and talented education. Because as Margarita Bianco says, you can't be what you don't see.
Mhm.
So when we see more people who look like us in gifted and talented education, then we know that we belong there. We have a right to have a seat at that table. All right. So yeah, our zip code, our skin color is not our destiny. And we just need to have so many more people writing and talking about that. So I know
Mhm.
you asked a question, was there one more thing that you didn't ask? You asked it, but I want to come back to it because one thing I really want to end with is you and I and others, we focus a lot on equity. Equity, equity. We've had the NAGC Equity Symposium, and so very necessary, as I already said. But I am so proud that I had an opportunity to use an equity formula in a gifted and talented education court case back in sometime between like 2009 and 2013 in Elgin, Illinois, District U46. And so now and we can instead just say, oh, my district is equitable when it comes to anything:
Mhm.
dropping out, special ed, discipline, advanced classes, no matter what. When you say you're equitable, I'm saying, show me your numbers. Show me your numbers, and then let's do these calculations. And when if you don't meet the minimum representation, all right, using this equity formula, then stop it. You're not equitable. We are still to this day trying to desegregate and integrate gifted and talented education, and we cannot stop. And we need to quantify equity. What is the minimum representation that we should have for you to be truly, truly, truly equitable?
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that. And again, thank you for your time as it pertains to showing up and providing us with information for NAGC's Legacy Archive Project. Thanks again, Dr. Donna Ford, for your time.
Thank you for that wonderful interview. It was good to just chat and just be
Yes,
our
yes, yes.
authentic selves.
Yep, sure
And
was.
NAGC, congratulations again, your 70th year. Same year as Brown versus the Board of Education, 1954.
There you
Equity, equity, equity.